The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio. Keep your mission on your mind and your mind on your mission. This is Mission Minded with Michael Coleman.
Welcome back to another rousing rendition of Mission Minded. Look at that big old cat eating grin you got in your face over there in our YouTube channel. He is Michael Coleman. He's the CEO, of course, of the Heart of Alabama Food Bank. We also do a show called Bite by Bite, which, of course, is in unison with our good friends at Feeding America. We just had a wonderful email, actually, a wonderful show, period, with the CFO and the CEO of that organization. You can go back and watch it wherever you get your favorite podcast, wherever we're all over the place, is what I'm trying to say. You can be honest anywhere you want. Of course, you can also watch the shows right here on our fantastic YouTube channel. Michael, without further ado, how are you, sir? Everything good?
Fantastic. Really excited about this Christmas season. It's a busy time for us with fundraising and all, but it's excited to be with you today to always talk like we always do. And time of the year feels good, get to spend time with family and just excited about the progress we've made this past year. Looking forward to next year.
It really is. Certainly not at your level because you cover 35 counties in the state of Alabama. But when my ex and I, of course, had the Bright House Foundation, it was a foundation for special needs individuals and children. And we worked with the ARC of Jefferson County, ARC of Walker County, and a lot of wonderful organizations to help provide. We call it the special needs caulk, if you will. There's a lot of people that fall in between the cracks or people that don't know where to get help.
Right.
We didn't do food per se, but we certainly did Christmas gifts. We did bedding, we did diapers, we did things like that people have perhaps weren't thinking of over the holidays. And so this was a very rewarding time of the year for us, but it was our go-to time. So how do you balance those things as a father, as a grandfather, as an individual who's got a huge heart? And I know you've been giving your life to his service and Jesus's entire life. This is second nature for you, but how do you keep things separate a little bit from your family situation? Because this is the kind, I even said last week, everyone's in transient, everyone's late for things. We're blowing things off. There's Christmas parties. Well, I'm taking off the last 16 days of the year. I decided da. And then here you are really getting out of the nitty gritty because you're a wanted man right now.
Yeah, so it goes back to a lot of things we've talked about, some of the principles that we've talked about, which is, one of the things that's really important is taking care of your employees, because if the employees' morale is low, if you take care of them or if they are overworked or underappreciated, they're really the ones who are doing that literally and figuratively, the heavy lifting to be able to get our stuff to our clients. And so sometimes we have to prioritize and then sometimes we just have to say, you know what, I can't keep my employees late. They have to go home to their families. They have a life. Now I'm an old man now. My kids are grown. I've got grandkids. It's just me and my wife. My wife's not clamoring for me to come home any particular night. She probably enjoys the mini vacations. But because my life is, it's a time in my life where I have a little bit more availability and I'm not as pressured, what I have to do is be very mindful and sensitive to the fact that that's not how everybody else is. And a lot of senior people in this organization still have children at home and they're still navigating that space. So I want to be very sensitive to all of that because if I start to lose them, then it's going to trickle down to where the clients themselves are not being taken care of like they should. So sometimes I have to step back and just make sure I maintain the proper perspective of what's good for them.
And then how do you get back up after the holidays? I mean, I know when you work with the Jimmy Hill Mission, obviously this time was very, very important because it was Thanksgiving. You wanted to put nice hot meals on the table. You wanted to create new memories for a lot of individuals that perhaps were turning their lives around to give their lives to Jesus Christ. And certainly during the holiday season, that's a good time to do that. And the fact that it was cold, you had a lot, of course, of service areas open, including Boutwell. You're working with the city to make sure that people were warm enough for the holidays. So you've given your life in a lot of serviceable different ways. but I mean, then come January, there's usually a little bit of a letdown for a lot of individuals. The Christmas lights go back in the box.
Sure.
We get back to our old ho hum ways. We're not giving as much as we normally do. How does that change for Michael Coleman?
Yeah, so I've mentioned this before in previous shows that our funding goes from our fiscal year goes from July to June. So really what happens is I'm used to kind of operating in the negative or close, somewhat in the negative until you get into the November, December timeframe, and then you raise enough during that time, it kind of elevates you to back into the black, and then you stay in the black the last 6 months, or at least that's the goal and the hope. And so it all depends on, that's why this time of year is so important in terms of fundraising is, you need that to kind of put you over the hump. And one of the things I explain to people is, look, you may be giving us money now, may not affect what we're able to distribute at Christmas, but it's going to affect what food we can distribute in March and April and May. But it is a little bit of a restart, but I look at times like that, January. So we've been running to this holiday season, both on the fundraising side and on the food distribution side, just running really hard. And so I try to make sure families get to spend the time of Christmas. We give them the day after Christmas and also New Year's and the day after New Year's to just kind of get their batteries recharged. And then we come back in and the pace is a little bit slower. And so that's where we begin to really start planning out for the rest of the year. It's just not a good time now. Everybody's mind's on certain things, family and all that. So it's hard to get employees sometimes really focus in. So it's just one of those things where I go, yeah, I'd love to be sitting down and planning and doing all that stuff right now. But look, the employees, they've worked hard, they're working hard, and let's just get through the end of the year. We kind of reboot and we kind of start rethinking about where we're going to put our energies moving forward. So January is not a downtime in the sense of we're still distributing a lot of food.
Sure.
People still are going to be hungry, but it's really a time where the pace is not as much because it's probably the slowest fundraising month. And so you start really spending the time to think through and tighten up your plans for the year and just kind of addressing what holes there have been in the past year and how to fix those. And so a lot of time spent with the staff, but just a lot of time thinking through issues and how to move forward effectively.
Can you talk about, before we get into our topic too, can you talk about food specificity from the standpoint of, this is the holiday season and we'd like to think that everyone's going to have a plate of turkey and dressing and cranberries on their plate over the holidays. How you actually make that possible and how you pull it off?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer because I would be lying if I didn't say my faith affects, even though we are a secular organization, we're not a faith-based organization. My personal faith really drives a lot of what I do and why I care about people. And so when I'm thinking about taking people who don't have enough on a day-to-day basis, one of the most important times is when family can come back together. And so the normal time that you see this throughout history has always been about doing it around a meal, gathering around a meal and having that time. And so it's just very important that we are able to provide people with the resources to be able to do that. So for instance, when we distribute ham, we bought a truckload of hams and they're just 3 to 5 pound hams.
Mm-hmm.
But we spent $60,000 to get that truckload in. We bought a truckload of turkeys, and this was before Thanksgiving. But we're doing it all because we're trying to make sure that families, we're not the sole provider of anybody's food. We're a supplement to people. But we understand that Thanksgiving and Christmas are just special times where you get to gather around and get to build relationship, and it's memories that are created. It's where faith is restored. It's where people are encouraged, and the bottom line is the one thing that can really sour that time is if there's not enough food to feed the family around there. So we really go out of our way because we feel like it's more than just a meal at that time, at this time of year. And it's not going to be that way the rest of the time of year. We're really about trying to get seniors and children and make sure they just got enough food to get by. But it's really these times we try to focus a little bit extra to make sure they try to have enough of a well balanced, well rounded meal that they can have enjoy with their families.
You brought up the idea of joy and hopefulness, and I think it's a really interesting part of the year because for people who do, and I know a lot of people like to do this anonymously, and that's fine as long as they do it. It doesn't matter. I know a lot of people write you big checks, and they don't want their names on any buildings. They don't want anyone to know what's going on. That's certainly wonderful, and we admire and respect that. It does make that individual feel very, very good about giving back and doing, particularly when they've been blessed in their own lives to do the right thing. But it also is not only a blessing to make them feel good, but it also makes the individual they're helping. Just talk about that a little bit. The individual they're helping feel good, not so much because they have a belly full, but because they can restore their own faith and hope in humanity as we know it. They know there's good people out there that can actually help them. I think that may me even more than the actual giving itself.
You know, there's so much truth to what you just said. Our tagline is feeding hope by fighting hunger. There's, I was talking with somebody recently about other countries. There's no other country in the world that has the safeguards and safety nets that we have. So there may be other Western countries who, where the government may issue out some food stamps and things like that. But the food banking network, when you look out through the vast majority of the world, there is no government support, and certainly not a support like the Feeding America network that's covering all the counties in the United States. If you're in a lot of these other countries and you're hungry, you're just hungry.
Yeah.
And if your neighbor doesn't step up, so a lot of it is when people get so desperate, and we do see such desperation, when you don't really know where your next meal is coming from, when somebody steps up with a box of food that's going to cover you for a week or going to help you, especially if you have others depending on you like children, boy, it's just and you feel like, you know, we've all been there to where we were anxious about something, and then all of a sudden somebody came along and either solved that or helped us to the next phase of that, and you kind of just feel you just take a sigh of relief.
Mm-hmm.
And to a single mom who's working and trying to put food on the table, for us to be able to come along and say, hey, look, take the money you were going to use on this. Let us give you this. Now you have more food for you and your child. And you use that to pay for your gas to go to work, or use that to pay for the electricity in your home, whatever it is. And you can just see the smiles that come across their face because they're like, hey, I'm not in this alone. And it makes all the difference in the world. And I wish everybody who donated money and donated their time as a volunteer could see the reaction of those that actually received the food, because I think it would be a better thank you than the letters that we send them.
It's a beautiful thing. It really is. Speaking of beautiful things, he's Michael Coleman. He's the CEO, of course, the Heart of Alabama Food Bank, HAFB. You can hashtag that or go to HAFB.org or .com and check out their website. They do wonderful work. And of course, we're doing a show called Mission Mind. Keep your mind, your mission on your mind. Throughout the holidays, you sent me a very interesting, and normally I do look at the things you sent me, but you sent me a little video and I thought, we'll just talk about it. You're like, no, you have to watch this video in order to get the idea. It's called Selective Attention. Basically tell people what this 2-minute video, because we can't show it here, but basically tell people what this video is of and why you had me watch it.
Yeah, so I saw it years ago. They played it again at the Feeding America conference. So there was about, let's just say 300 people in the room. If you go to YouTube and just look up Selective Attention, there's 3 people in white shirts and 3 people in black shirts. And it says, okay, they start moving, intertwining themselves in a circle, and they're passing a basketball, and they say the thing is, you need to count how many times the people in the white shirts pass the basketball. So You're like, okay, so you just get locked in, and at the end, you're like, okay, 15. It'll come on the screen. They'll say, okay, 15, and then it comes on after and it goes, but did you see the gorilla? And you're like, what?
Well,
And so you go back and play it, and sure enough, a guy in a gorilla costume walks in the middle of the circle, turns around, beats his chest, and then walks off the stage. And we get so focused on that we don't even see that something is obvious. And it's funny when you notice it, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. I mean,
sure.
it becomes obvious to you. I will tell you, there's another. They did another experiment I thought was very interesting, and I wish I tell you what, for those who are watching on that, maybe I can hold it up. My background. Anyway, it was an exam. It was an MRI of a lung scan,
Mm-hmm.
and this doctor sent it out, and she had put on it an actual gorilla it's about a quarter to a half inch of a picture, just shrunk down and put in this. And she said, please look at the tissue. 83% of the people didn't see the gorilla that was implanted into the lung, because they're analyzing the lung tissue. And it just goes to that selective attention. But when you take this over into the business community, it's something I can certainly identify with, is we all have blind spots. And so the question is, okay, if we're all susceptible to this and having blind spots, well then how do you grow in that? How do you get better? How do you get become aware of something that you cannot see? And I thought that's really an interesting question.
It's really interesting, but you can also spin it a little bit. If you had this in front of your 100 employees and say 2 or 3 of them actually did see the gorilla, then what would you think of those? Because then they're not being focused enough on the ones that are passing the basketball, right? So you're like, well, what were you looking at? You obviously weren't paying attention. So there's a plus and minus person, right? You think it's really cool they saw the gorilla, but they ain't supposed to see the gorilla because they're not focusing on what you asked them to focus on. So are those the ones you need to worry about?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I have not thought of it from that perspective. That's an interesting take on that.
Yeah.
I will tell you, so I'm reading through this article on it and just reading this perspective, and the person said that she was coaching somebody, and that the person was just not suited for this position, but the person said they wanted to keep doing it. And it brought me back to when I came to the food bank. We had somebody who was our volunteer coordinator. And the volunteer coordinator, unfortunately, was all focused on the task. And so she'd get volunteers in, and then she would just start treating them like rented mules. And, we're going to crack the whip until you get in there and you're going to get the task done. And then they'd leave there and they would feel just beat up. And so I said, no, this is the whole wrong approach. What we want, here's an opportunity to bring in 10 volunteers and let them leave here and go, what an amazing experience that was. It was not important to me how many boxes they packed or how much food they moved. It was that they came and they felt accomplished and they felt good about it. And so then they left there and told their friends about it. And so I said, do you understand that? And she said, yes. And so, but she kept on. And so I told her, so I tried to move her within there a little bit and kept on. And so finally I had to do that exact same thing. I had to call her in and say, I'm not going to mention her name, but I'm going to say, you're just not a good fit for this position and what I'm looking for. And she didn't get it. She said, well, I'm very outgoing. I'm very friendly. And I was doing everything I could to just get her off of it. But she forced me to say in a much different way is that, no, you suck at this. I mean, you're terrible. Of course, I didn't say it like that.
Yeah.
But her perspective of herself, she was so blind to what she thought she was projecting to others, but everybody in the organization saw her for what it really was. So then I thought, well, that could be me, and I don't want that to be me. But again, I know that I have blind spots. And so and so I was really interested in how do I change that dynamic? How do I overcome and get regular feedback and honest feedback on something that I don't see on a day-to-day basis?
Well, and I think it's important too to lay it out as in you never know what to expect in anything in business. We always talk about plan Bs and plan Cs. We don't, and I know some people are like, there are no plan Bs and plan Cs. We're making plan A work. We don't want to give you an out. You're right.
Right.
But everyone knows it's important to have a plan B or plan C, particularly in warfare. We see that. But if you go into a situation with a gorilla in the room and you know it's coming,
Yeah.
then are you better off to let that employee, hey, listen, just keep your eyes open because you never know what's going to happen? Or do you expect them to have that unadulterated, fixated, respectful, yes, I'm going to do exactly what he's telling me to do way of going through things in order to not get hit with the blind spot because you don't know what some blind spots are important, some aren't.
I mean, even if I were to tell somebody, hey, be careful because anything could come into view here.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of us when we are told to do a task and we're doing it to a certain standard to get so fixated on it, we don't see all the or hear all the noise around us. One of the things I think is very important, I read through some of the things they suggested, was because I tend to like to keep things positive. And I learned this in the Army is when you have an event, you don't want to say, okay, what we do right, what they taught us is you say, okay, what was supposed to happen, what did happen, and how do we make it better the next time?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're kind of keeping it positive. You're still addressing some of the things you missed, but you're not really. But the idea is you don't want to focus on the mistakes the person made. You want to focus on the mistakes themselves, but not on the blame of the person. So leaders like myself have to come along and go, okay, I planned this out or I oversaw this. What did I miss? What did I miss? And I have people like that in my life. And this actually kind of goes in with another point, which is you've got to have people that know it's safe to speak truth into your life. Because I know a lot of people who say, I want you to speak truth, and you do, and then they get butt hurt, and then they don't want to, and look, nobody that I've ever met enjoys being criticized. I don't enjoy it.
Yeah.
But it's just part of the growth process. And I have to want to grow as a person more than I want to be right. And so I surround myself with people and authentically ask them to be truthful. Now, I will also admit that there are times where I'm like, no, that's a poor assessment or that's a misunderstanding. But if I'm getting that same feedback from multiple people or multiple times, it doesn't matter what my intentions or motives are. This is how I'm coming across. So I'm guilty of it, regardless if I justified in my head, well, that's not what I meant. The bottom line is that's what I'm projecting. And I am blind to that and will continue to be blind to that until I sit down and directly ask people, what did I miss? Tell me what I'm not seeing. Tell me what's hurting the organization by a quality that I have or something I'm doing. And the truth is never fun, but it's always good if you take it in the right. Which after I get through licking my wounds for a day or two, I'm usually okay.
What is the most important thing you take away from showing people this clip? What is, or is there anything that ever surprises you?
Well, the whole thing about missing the point on things is about self-awareness. We can be convinced that we are, let's say, very good with people, like my volunteer coordinator. She was convinced that she was doing a pleasurable experience. Yet I had person after person after person tell me how miserable it was when they came because there was no appreciation. It was all about getting the task done like they were employees.
Yeah.
And but you couldn't tell her anything. I mean, when she acted like when I was telling her that I was just making all this stuff up, and that's a bad place to be, is when we lack self-awareness. I would much rather, even if somebody's doing something that's not of the healthiest nature or the best, if they're aware of it and they can at times stop themselves or try to behave differently because they're like, oh man, this is one of my triggers where I get really angry, or this is, so I'm really trying to be aware of that so that I don't go there. Self-awareness about everything, but it just illustrates so easily how we lack perception as to what's happening in the moment. Because so many of us, if the video didn't go back and show us the gorilla, and we said there was a gorilla, there'd be people that'd be betting their houses. There's no gorilla. I just sat right there and watched that video. There was no gorilla that walked out there on this video.
Oh, there's a gorilla, that's for sure. What's the clip again so people can find it?
Selective attention. And you can just type into the YouTube and just put in there about gorilla counting, passing the ball, mention a gorilla, and it'll pop up. It's pretty easy.
That's great. This is Mission Minded. Keep in mind your mission, your mind. You can check out the show at least 5 days a week here on the TKR app. Of course, over 100,000 people have downloaded that app. We greatly appreciate you. You can listen to the show live throughout the week. And, of course, wherever you get your favorite podcast, we're available on every major industry. And watch it right here on the Tony Curry YouTube channel. Michael, thank you so much. Bite by Bite's up next.
Enjoyed it.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.